The paternity test results destroyed my life in under 60 seconds. My name is Charles Whitmore, and I'm 47 years old. 18 years of marriage. 3 kids I'd raised from birth. Tyler, Emma, Lucas. All of them? Not mine. Not a single strand of my DNA. When you discover the children you loved, protected, and financially supported don't share your blood, something breaks inside that can never be fixed. My wife, Diane, cried when I confronted her. She said she was sorry. She wanted forgiveness, understanding. What she got instead was the full force of a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to take back. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted with your whole life, you'll understand why I did what I did. And if you haven't, you'll understand by the time I'm done. But let me start from the beginning. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. The paternity test results sat on my kitchen table like 3 loaded guns. I'd been staring at them for an hour, maybe 2. Time had stopped meaning anything the moment I opened those envelopes. Tyler Whitmore, 0% probability of paternity. Emma Whitmore, 0% probability of paternity. Lucas Whitmore, 0% probability of paternity. 3 names, 3 percentages, all reading 0. I'd ordered the tests 3 weeks ago on what I'd told myself was just a hunch. Lucas had come home from science class talking about blood types, excited about some genetics unit they were doing. He'd mentioned his type, then asked about mine and Diane's. The math didn't work. It nagged at me for days, until I couldn't ignore it anymore. So I did what any rational person would do when suspicion starts eating them alive. I sought the truth. I just wasn't prepared for the truth to detonate my entire life. The front door opened at 7:15. Diane came home from her Tuesday book club, all smiles and wine-flushed cheeks, carrying that oversized purse she always brought. She was mid-laugh, probably replaying some story from the evening, when she looked up and saw me sitting there. She stopped cold. The smile died on her face. "Charles," she said, her voice already shaking. "What are those?" "DNA tests." I didn't move, didn't blink, just watched her face drain of color. For Tyler, Emma, and Lucas, all 3 kids. Want to guess what they say? She went pale so fast, I thought she might collapse right there in the doorway. Her purse slipped from her shoulder and hit the floor with a dull thud. "Oh, God! Charles! None of them are mine." I stood up slowly, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. The words came out flat, emotionless, because if I let any feeling into my voice, I'd start screaming and never stop. 18 years, Diane. 18 goddamn years I've been raising another man's children. 3 of them. She started crying immediately. That ugly, gasping kind of crying that might have moved me once upon a time. Not anymore. Not after this. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" My voice cut through the kitchen like a blade. 3 separate mistakes? Or was it the same man for all 3? No. Wait. Let me guess. You don't even know, do you? "It was different times," she sobbed, taking a step toward me. "We were having problems, and I wasn't thinking clearly, and we were having problems, so you cheated?" Something hot and vicious rose in my chest. "And then you let me believe I was their father? Let me pay for everything, raise them, love them. Jesus Christ, Diane, do you have any idea what you've done?" She reached for me with trembling hands. I stepped back so fast, the chair scraped against the floor. "Don't you dare touch me. Don't you dare pretend you have any right to ask for comfort right now. They're still your children," she tried, desperation creeping into her voice. "Biology doesn't matter. You're their father in every way that counts. That's not your decision to make," I roared, and she flinched backward like I'd struck her. You stole that choice from me. You let me pour my entire life into raising kids that aren't mine. And you never, not once in 18 years, had the decency to tell me the truth. I was afraid, she whispered. Of what? Losing your comfortable life? Losing the house I paid for? The cars I bought? The private school tuition I've been bleeding myself dry to afford? I grabbed the papers and shoved them toward her. Who are their fathers, Diane? Do you even know their names? She couldn't look at me. Her gaze dropped to the floor, and that told me everything I needed to know. There were a few guys. After we'd fight, I'd go out, and multiple men. I laughed, and it sounded like something breaking. My God. So Tyler could be one guy's, Emma another's, and Lucas a third? You turned our marriage into some kind of twisted lottery, where I was the only one guaranteed to lose. Please, Charles. Who were they? I demanded. Names, Diane. I want names. I don't remember all of them. Her voice was barely audible. It was so long ago, and I was drunk most of the time, and the kitchen spun. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. You don't even remember the men who fathered your children. Charles, please, don't tell the kids, she begged suddenly, her eyes wide with panic. Please, Charles, they don't deserve. Don't you dare tell me what they deserve. I grabbed my keys off the counter, my movements sharp and deliberate. You should have thought about them before you spent 18 years lying to everyone. I headed for the door. She scrambled after me, grabbing at my arm. Where are you going? I shook her off. I'm calling Frank Whitaker first thing tomorrow morning. I suggest you find yourself a lawyer too. And Diane? I turned back to look at her one last time. Pack a bag. You're not staying in my house tonight. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. I walked out into the November cold, leaving her sobbing on the kitchen floor, and I didn't look back. Wednesday morning, I sat across from Frank Whitaker in his downtown office. The view stretched out over the city, gray buildings under a grayer sky that matched my mood perfectly. Frank was a bulldog of a man in his 60s, with silver hair and a handshake that could crack walnuts. He had a reputation for decimating unfaithful spouses in court, which was exactly why I'd chosen him. This is perhaps the most clear-cut case of paternity fraud I've seen in 30 years, Frank said, spreading the DNA results across his mahogany desk. His reading glasses caught the light as he studied each document. Your wife obtained financial support under completely false pretenses for 18 years. That's not just morally reprehensible, it's legally actionable. Can I get back child support? I asked. My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. We can certainly try. In this state, there's precedent for men in your situation to recoup costs. Frank pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars over 18 years, possibly more when you factor in private school tuition, health care, extracurriculars, vacations, every baseball glove, every dance recital costume, every college savings deposit. I remembered Tyler's travel baseball team. $7,000 a year. Easy. Emma's dance classes and competitions. Lucas's orthodontic work that cost more than my first car. I want everything, I said, and my hands curled into fists on the armrests. Every penny I spent on those kids. The house is in my name. The cars are in my name. I want her to walk away with nothing but the clothes on her back. Frank set down his pen and looked at me over those reading glasses. I need to be clear about something, Charles. The children are innocent in this. Tyler, Emma, Lucas. They didn't choose any of this. If you pursue aggressive action, it will affect them directly. They're not my children, I said flatly. Their mother should have thought about how her lies would affect them before she spent 2 decades deceiving everyone. Fair enough. Frank nodded and went back to his notes. We'll file for divorce on the grounds of adultery and fraud. We'll seek full reimbursement for child support paid under false pretenses. We'll ensure the house, vehicles, and all marital assets remain with you since you were the sole financial contributor. And she obtained everything through deception. What about her? I leaned forward. Diane, what happens to her? If we prove fraud, which we can, easily, she'll be liable for repayment. If she can't pay, we'll pursue wage garnishment, asset seizure, whatever it takes. Frank looked up at me with those sharp attorney's eyes. She could face criminal charges, too, depending on how hard you want to push this. The DA's office tends to take a dim view of fraud on this scale. I want to push it as hard as the law allows. Then that's what we'll do. Over the next week, Diane tried everything. She called my phone 53 times the first day alone. I counted before I blocked her number. Each voicemail was the same desperate loop. Apologies mixed with excuses. Crying mixed with anger. Begging mixed with accusations that I was being cruel. On Thursday, her sister Emily showed up at my temporary apartment. I'd moved into a furnished place downtown the night I kicked Diane out. "Charles, please," Emily said when I opened the door. "The kids are devastated. Tyler won't eat. Emma cries herself to sleep every night. Lucas doesn't understand why his dad just abandoned them." "I'm not their dad," I told her. "That's the whole point. Biology doesn't make someone a father. If you contact me again, I'm getting a restraining order." I started to close the door. "She made a mistake." Emily's voice rose. "Yes, it was terrible. But she's still a human being, Charles. She's still the mother of those children. And you're destroying her." "Good." I shut the door in her face. Friday, Diane showed up at my office. My secretary Margaret called security when Diane refused to leave the lobby. I watched from my office window as 2 guards escorted her out to the parking lot, her mascara running down her face. Margaret documented everything. Time, date, what Diane said, how long she stayed. It all went into the file Frank was building. Friday evening, I met Seth at our usual place, a quiet bar near the waterfront where we'd been meeting for drinks since college. 25 years of friendship meant he knew me well enough to skip the pleasantries. "How are you holding up?" Seth asked as we slid into our regular booth. "I'm not," I admitted. The whiskey burned going down, but it was a clean burn. Honest. Every time I see those kids, Tyler, Emma, Lucas, I remember that they're not mine. That everything I felt for them was based on a lie Diane told. They still love you, though. That's real. Is it? I swirled the amber liquid in my glass. Or is that just another lie? Maybe they'll grow up and find out the truth, and they'll hate me for walking away. Or maybe they'll understand that their mother destroyed everything. I don't know anymore, Seth. I don't know anything except that Diane lied for 18 years straight. What you do know, Seth said carefully, is that Diane deserves what's coming to her. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for that. I don't feel guilty, I said, and realized it was true. The anger was too big, too all-consuming to leave room for guilt. I feel angry, and I'm going to stay angry until she pays for every second of the lie she made me live. 2 weeks after I kicked Diane out, the kids found out. I hadn't wanted to tell them, not like this, not yet. But she forced my hand by running to Tyler with her version of the story. "Daddy is being cruel for no reason," she'd apparently said. Tyler called me that Wednesday afternoon to ask what the hell was going on. So I drove to Diane's new apartment, a cramped 2-bedroom place she'd rented with what little money she had left, and told her I was taking the kids for the evening. She didn't argue. Maybe she knew what was coming. I brought them back to the house. Our house. My house now. They sat on the couch in the living room. Tyler on one end, Emma in the middle, Lucas on the other. 3 kids I'd raised from birth, staring at me with confusion and hurt, written all over their faces. I sat in the chair across from them. "Your mother and I are getting divorced," I started. "Because of the DNA tests?" Tyler asked quietly. My blood ran cold. "What do you know about the DNA tests?" "Mom told me," Tyler's voice was barely a whisper. She said, you found out. We're not really yours. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. Lucas just stared at me, his 11-year-old face trying to process words that were too big, too devastating. It's true, I said, and the words tasted like poison. None of you are biologically mine. Your mother had affairs, multiple affairs, and she never told me. For 18 years, I thought I was your father. I raised you, loved you, provided for you. And the entire time, it was based on a lie she told. Emma started crying immediately, those quiet, shaking sobs that tore straight through me. Lucas's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't make a sound. But you're still our dad, Emma sobbed. You're still… No, I cut her off, and I hated myself for the hardness in my voice. I'm not. Your real fathers are out there somewhere. Men your mother cheated with. Men whose names she might not even remember. Tyler shot to his feet, his face flushed with anger. So that's it? You're just done with us because of some test? Your mother lied to me for 18 years. I shot back, standing to face him. She stole from me. My time, my money, my love, everything. And you want me to just pretend it doesn't matter? We didn't lie to you, Tyler shouted. We didn't do anything wrong. I know that, I said. Softer now, but still sharp. But every time I look at you, all I see is her betrayal. I see the lie I've been living. I see 18 years of my life that were built on fraud. And I can't keep pretending that doesn't change everything. Lucas stood up and ran. Just bolted down the hallway to his old room, his shoulders shaking. Emma followed him a second later, crying so hard she could barely breathe. Tyler stayed. He stood there in the middle of the living room, tears streaming down his face, glaring at me with a mixture of hurt and rage I'd never seen before. I hate her for this, he said, his voice cracking. But I hate you more for walking away. He turned and left before I could respond. The front door slammed a minute later. Through the window, I watched him walk down the driveway, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. I sat alone in that living room for hours after they left. The evening light faded to darkness, and I didn't bother turning on the lamps. Family photos covered the walls. Tyler's first baseball game. I'd taught him how to swing a bat in the backyard, spent hours pitching to him until his hands were covered in blisters. Emma's dance recital when she was 7, wearing that ridiculous tutu she'd insisted on sleeping in for a week afterward. Lucas on Christmas morning 3 years ago, surrounded by wrapping paper and wearing the biggest smile I'd ever seen. All those memories felt contaminated now, like they belonged to someone else's life. Some other father who actually had a right to feel proud, to feel love, to feel anything but this hollow, burning rage. You ever look at your own history and realize it's fiction? That's what those photos were. A story I'd believed was mine, but it never had been. I couldn't stop, though. Not now. Not when I was this close to making Diane pay for everything she'd done. The kids would understand eventually, or they wouldn't, but either way, justice was coming. And Diane was going to face every consequence she'd spent 18 years trying to avoid. 3 weeks passed like a slow bleed. I didn't hear from Tyler, Emma, or Lucas. Didn't expect to. The divorce hearing was scheduled for a gray Tuesday morning in late October, and I spent the drive downtown rehearsing everything I wanted to say, though Frank had warned me I probably wouldn't get the chance. Let me do the talking, he'd told me the day before. You just sit there and look wronged, which, frankly, won't be hard. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Cold, too. I sat on one side with Frank, while Diane sat on the other with her attorney, a nervous-looking younger man named Gerald Parker, who kept shuffling papers like he was searching for a miracle buried in the filings. Diane looked terrible, thinner than I'd ever seen her, with dark circles under her eyes that made her look a decade older. She wouldn't meet my gaze. Good. I didn't want to see her face anyway. Judge Vilma Rodriguez entered, and we all stood. She was a stern woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She settled into her seat, reviewed the documents in front of her, and looked up with an expression that could have frozen fire. "This is one of the most egregious cases of paternity fraud I've seen in my career," she said flatly. "Mrs. Whitmore, do you dispute the DNA evidence presented by your husband?" Diane stood on shaking legs. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "No, Your Honor, I don't dispute it. And do you acknowledge that you misrepresented the paternity of 3 children over the course of 18 years? "Yes, Your Honor." Diane's voice cracked. "But I love my children, and I loved my husband. I made terrible mistakes, but I was trying to protect my family." Judge Rodriguez's expression didn't change. "Protect your family?" Her tone could have cut steel. "Mrs. Whitmore, you built your family on a foundation of lies. You defrauded your husband of hundreds of thousands of dollars and 18 years of his life. There is no protecting that." I felt something loosen in my chest. Finally, someone who understood. Frank stood, crisp and professional. "Your Honor, we're seeking full reimbursement for all child support paid under false pretenses. We've calculated the total at approximately $473,000 when including direct payments, medical expenses, education costs, and extracurriculars. We're also seeking exclusive ownership of all marital assets, as they were obtained through fraud." Gerald Parker shot to his feet. "Your Honor, my client has no means to repay that sum. She's been a homemaker for the past 15 years. Forcing repayment would leave her destitute." "Then she should have considered that before committing fraud." Judge Rodriguez cut him off. "Mr. Parker, unless you have a compelling legal argument, I suggest you save your breath." Parker sat back down, deflated. The hearing lasted 3 hours. 3 hours of Frank methodically presenting evidence, bank statements, school tuition receipts, medical bills, the DNA tests themselves. 3 hours of Gerald Parker trying and failing to mount any real defense. 3 hours of Diane sitting there crying quietly, while her entire world collapsed. When Judge Rodriguez finally delivered her ruling, it was everything I'd hoped for. "The court finds in favor of Mr. Whitmore on all counts. Mrs. Whitmore will owe full reimbursement for child support, to be collected via wage garnishment once she obtains employment. The house, vehicles, and all savings accounts will remain with Mr. Whitmore. Mrs. Whitmore will be awarded minimal alimony for a period of 2 years only, just enough to establish independent living, and nothing more." She paused, looking directly at Diane. "Furthermore, I'm ordering a full investigation into potential criminal fraud charges. Mrs. Whitmore, you should retain criminal counsel. This court is adjourned." The gavel came down. Diane collapsed into her chair, sobbing so hard her shoulders shook. Gerald Parker looked shell-shocked, staring at his papers like they might offer some answer he'd missed. I stood and walked out. Didn't look back. Didn't need to. Outside the courthouse, Frank caught up with me on the steps. The October air was cold, sharp in my lungs. "That was about as good an outcome as we could have hoped for," Frank said. "She's buried, Charles. Financially, legally, socially, she's done." "Good," I said, and I meant it. The kids stopped speaking to me entirely after the hearing. Tyler sent me one text 3 days later. "I hope you're happy. You destroyed everything." I stared at those words for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, ready to type something back. But what was there to say? That I wasn't happy? That destroying everything was exactly what Diane had done to me first? I didn't respond. Emma called a week after that. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Dad?" Her voice was so small, so broken. It reminded me of when she was 6 and fell off her bike, crying in my arms while I cleaned the scrapes on her knees. "What is it, Emma? Why can't you just forgive Mom?" The tears came fast. "Everyone makes mistakes. She said she's sorry. Why can't that be enough? Not like this, I said, my jaw tight. Not lies this big, Emma. What she did, that's not a normal mistake. What about us? Her voice cracked. Don't you love us anymore? I wanted to say yes. God, I wanted to tell her that of course I loved her, that 18 years of memories couldn't just vanish because of some DNA test. But the words stuck in my throat like broken glass. I don't know what I feel anymore, I admitted finally. I'm sorry, Emma. I just don't know. She hung up without another word. Lucas never reached out at all. That silence hurt worse than anything Tyler or Emma said. My brother David called from California on a Tuesday evening. Mom told me what happened, he said. Jesus, Charles, I don't even know what to say. Then don't say anything. Are you really going to make Diane pay back $500,000? His voice carried that older brother judgment I'd heard my whole life. That'll ruin her life. She ruined mine first, I shot back. The kids aren't my problem anymore. The words came out colder than I intended. They're hers. Let her figure out how to take care of them on her own. That's what she should have done 18 years ago instead of lying to me. David sighed, long and heavy. You're scorching the earth here, man. There won't be anything left when you're done. That's the point, I said. He tried to argue more, but I hung up. I didn't need his judgment. Didn't need anyone telling me I was going too far when they had no idea what it felt like to discover your entire life was built on lies. Winter came early that year. The first snow fell in mid-November, covering everything in white that turned gray and ugly within days. By December, Diane had moved with the kids into a small apartment on the south side of town. I knew because my lawyer kept me updated on her address for the garnishment paperwork. She'd found work at some call center. Minimum wage, barely enough to cover rent and food. My wage garnishment took 25% of every paycheck she received. Frank sent me copies of the garnishment notices. I'd see the numbers, her gross pay, the amount deducted, what she had left. It was never much, barely enough to survive on. I kept the notices in a folder on my desk, looked at them sometimes when I couldn't sleep. Seth checked on me every week. We'd been meeting for coffee on Saturday mornings since college. One of those rituals you keep even when everything else falls apart. This particular Saturday, he slid into the booth across from me at our usual coffee shop. The place smelled like espresso and cinnamon rolls, warm and familiar. It reminded me of when the kids were young and I'd bring them here for hot chocolate after hockey practice. Lucas always getting whipped cream on his nose. I pushed the memory away. You doing okay? Seth asked, studying my face. I'm fine, I lied. You don't look fine. You look like you haven't slept in weeks. Because I haven't. I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup, feeling the heat seep into my palms. Every time I close my eyes, I see their faces. Tyler's anger, Emma's tears. Lucas won't even look at me now when I drive past Diane's apartment. You drive past her apartment? Seth's eyebrows rose. Sometimes. I didn't know why I admitted that. Not to see them. Just, I don't know. To remind myself why I'm doing this. Seth leaned back, choosing his words carefully. Maybe that's telling you something, Charles. Maybe. Don't. My voice came out sharp. Don't start with that "they're still your kids" nonsense. They're not. They never were. Biologically, no. But you raised them. You were there for every moment of their lives. That has to count for something. It counts for nothing, I said bitterly, because it was all based on a lie. Everything I felt, everything I did, it was for someone else's children. I was just the fool who paid the bills. Late January hit like a fist. Cold, brutal, unforgiving. The kind of cold that made your bones ache. I was sitting in the living room when the knocking started. Persistent, rhythmic, refusing to stop. I knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. Diane. I didn't move, didn't answer. Just sat there listening to her knock, over and over, Like maybe if she kept at it long enough I'd suddenly develop a conscience. But she didn't stop. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I yanked the door open, and the words died in my throat. She looked terrible. Thin. Like she'd lost 20 pounds she didn't have to lose. Dark circles under her eyes so deep they looked like bruises. Her hair hung limp around her face. She'd aged a decade in the 4 months since I'd kicked her out. "Charles," she said, her voice hoarse. "I know you don't want to see me. I know you don't want to hear this. But I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "You've said that before," I told her flatly. "I was young and stupid and scared," she continued, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I made terrible decisions, but I never meant to hurt you. You never wanted to get caught," I corrected. "There's a difference, Diane. Big difference between being sorry you did something and being sorry you got caught doing it." Her face crumpled, but she pushed forward, changed tactics. "It's not about me anymore. It's the kids, Charles. They're suffering. Tyler dropped out of school. He's working full-time at a warehouse just to help me pay rent. Emma's grades are failing. Lucas barely eats. They've lost everything. Their home, their security, their father. I'm not their father," I said coldly. She grabbed my arm then, her fingers digging in with desperate strength. "You're the only father they've ever known. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Doesn't 18 years of being their dad count for something?" I pulled my arm free. "Don't touch me. Please." She was crying now, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks. "Please, Charles, I'll surrender everything. The house, the cars, all of it. Just drop the repayment demands. Let me keep enough to take care of them properly. They didn't ask for any of this. They don't deserve to pay for my mistakes. You should have thought about their future before you destroyed my life," I said. "I'll do anything," she sobbed. "Anything you want. Just please stop taking their future away. Get off my property." I cut her off. "And don't come back here." She crumpled right there on my porch, dropping to her knees like someone had cut her strings. The crying turned to something worse. Those deep, gasping sobs where you can't catch your breath, where your whole body shakes with it. I stepped inside and closed the door, locked it, walked away, while she cried on the other side. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The house felt too big, too empty. Every sound echoed, the furnace kicking on, the wind rattling the windows, the settling of floorboards in rooms no one used anymore. I'd won. That's what Frank had said after the hearing. "You won, Charles. Complete victory." Diane was destroyed, financially, emotionally, socially. She'd lost her home, her security, her dignity. The courts had ruled in my favor on every single count. The wage garnishment kept taking 25% of every paycheck. She'd never dig herself out, never recover from this. I'd gotten everything I wanted, so why did it feel like I was drowning? I rolled onto my side, pulling the blanket tighter even though the room wasn't cold. The digital clock on the nightstand glowed 2:47 a.m. Same time I'd woken up every night for the past month. Tyler had dropped out of school, 17 years old, working in a warehouse instead of finishing his senior year. Emma's grades were failing. Lucas wasn't eating. Not my kids, I reminded myself. Not my problem. But the voice in my head sounded hollow now, uncertain. I closed my eyes and saw Diane on my porch, broken, begging, offering to give up everything if I'd just show mercy to children who'd done nothing wrong. And I'd slammed the door in her face. Complete victory, Frank had called it. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like I was drowning in a house too big and too empty, surrounded by everything I'd won and nothing I actually wanted. Frank's call came on a Thursday afternoon in early February, about a week after Diane had shown up at my door. I was at my desk reviewing quarterly reports when my cell buzzed. "We have a problem," Frank said without preamble. His voice was tight, controlled. The kind of tone lawyers use when they're about to deliver bad news. My stomach dropped. What kind of problem? Gerald Parker filed a motion to overturn the reimbursement order. He's citing a 2019 state Supreme Court case, Jenkins versus Carlson. Ever heard of it? No. Should I have? Probably not. It wasn't widely publicized. I heard papers rustling on his end. The court ruled that parental obligations supersede biological connection after a certain time threshold. In Jenkins, the threshold was 5 years. You raised Tyler, Emma, and Lucas for 18. I gripped the phone harder. What does that mean? It means the legal precedent suggests you may still be financially responsible for those kids regardless of paternity. The argument is that you acted as their father for so long that you assumed legal responsibility. De facto parentage, they call it. That's insane, I said. Diane lied. She committed fraud. How can the court? I know, Frank cut me off. And yes, what she did was fraud. But the law also protects the children's interests. If the court determines your relationship with Tyler, Emma, and Lucas constitutes de facto parentage, you could be liable for continued support. And the reimbursement order could be overturned. The office suddenly felt too small, too hot. They can just take away everything I won? Just like that? The hearing's in 2 weeks. Frank's silence spoke volumes. I'll fight this, Charles. I'll prepare every argument, cite every precedent we have. But I need you to be prepared for the possibility that we might lose this one. After everything. I know. But Jenkins is solid precedent, and Parker's smart enough to use it. The next 2 weeks were hell. Frank prepared. He drafted arguments, filed briefs, pulled every relevant case he could find. But every time we met, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Doubt. He didn't say it out loud. Didn't need to. The way he'd pause mid-sentence, the way he'd review the same page twice, the way he'd shake his head just slightly when he thought I wasn't looking, it all told the same story. We might actually lose this. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. Didn't even try after midnight. At 3 a.m., I found myself in my home office, staring at boxes I'd pulled from the storage room. Photo albums. Years' worth of them. I opened the first one. Tyler's first baseball game. He was 7, standing at home plate with a bat way too big for his frame. I was crouched behind him, hands positioned over his, showing him how to grip it properly. Both of us were grinning at whoever was taking the picture. Probably Diane. The man in that photo looked happy, proud, like he had everything in the world figured out. That man had no idea he was living a lie. I flipped through more pages. Emma's dance recital when she was 9. Her tutu was pink, and she'd been so nervous backstage she threw up. I'd held her hair back, cleaned her up, told her she was going to be amazing. She was. The photo showed her taking her bow while I stood in the audience, clapping so hard my palms were red. Lucas's kindergarten graduation, 5 years old, wearing a tiny cap and gown that made him look even smaller. He'd spotted me in the crowd and waved so enthusiastically he nearly dropped his diploma. I'd waved back just as hard. In every single photo, I was smiling, happy, completely certain those were my children. The man in those pictures loved them. No question about it. He would have done anything for them, paid any price, made any sacrifice, fought any battle. But was that love real? Or was it just biology? Some evolutionary response hardwired into my brain because I thought they shared my DNA? If I'd known the truth from day one, if Diane had admitted on Tyler's first day home from the hospital that he wasn't mine, would I have felt the same way? I didn't know, and that terrified me more than losing the court case. I stared at Tyler's baseball photo for a long time, at the way 7-year-old him looked up at me like I knew all the answers, at the way I looked back at him like he was the most important thing in the world. The hearing was in 6 hours. and I had no idea what I actually wanted anymore. My phone buzzed on the desk. 3:17 a.m. Who the hell would text me at this hour? Unknown number. I almost didn't open it, but something made me click. Hey, it's Tyler. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know something. My chest tightened. I stared at the screen, waiting. Aunt Emily told me what Mom said, about how we're suffering because of you. That's not true. We're suffering because Mom lied, because she destroyed our family. Not you. Another message appeared. I'm still angry you walked away. I won't lie about that, but I get why you did it. I think I'd do the same thing if someone did this to me. Emma gets it too. Lucas will when he's older. Then, I hope you find peace, Charles. We'll be okay eventually. I promise. Tyler. I read it 5 times. Tears blurred the screen by the 3rd pass. Tyler was 17. Just a kid. And he was telling me he understood. That they'd be okay. When did I become the person who needed a teenager to give me permission to let go? I set the phone down and looked at the photos again. At the baseball game, the dance recital, the kindergarten graduation, all those moments where I thought I knew who we were. Diane destroyed everything. No question about that. She lied, cheated, betrayed every promise we'd made to each other. But what was I doing? I was scorching the earth, burning it all down until there was nothing left but ash, where a family used to exist. Tyler was right. They'd eventually be okay. But only if I stopped torching everything in my path just to prove a point. Revenge felt good. It felt justified. But what did it actually give me? An empty house, sleepless nights, 3 kids who'd lost the only father they'd ever known. I sat there until the sky started to lighten, until the anger that had kept me going for months finally cracked open enough to let something else through. Not forgiveness. I wasn't there yet. Maybe I'd never be. But something like clarity. At 7 a.m., I called Frank. Charles? His voice was groggy. The hearing's not until 11. What's? I want to settle. Silence. Then? What? Call Gerald Parker. Tell him we're settling. Charles, we've been preparing for this hearing for 2 weeks. We still have arguments we can make. I don't care about the arguments. I rubbed my eyes. Here's what I want. I drop all reimbursement demands. All of it. But Diane agrees I keep the house and the primary assets. In return, I'll set up trust funds for Tyler, Emma, and Lucas. College education, fully covered. And I'll give Diane enough money to move into a decent place. Not luxury. Decent. Somewhere the kids can have their own rooms, and she's not working herself to death. You're giving up $500,000. I know what I'm giving up, Frank. Then why? Because I'm giving up revenge, not justice. There's a difference. I stood and walked to the window. Early morning light was breaking over the neighborhood. Diane still admits fault in the divorce decree, and she never contacts me again unless it's about the kids' welfare. Those terms are non-negotiable. Frank was quiet for a long moment. You're sure about this? I'm sure. All right. I'll call Parker now. That afternoon, we stood in Judge Rodriguez's courtroom one last time. Diane looked worse than she had at my door. Thinner, more exhausted, defeated in a way that went deeper than just losing money. Gerald Parker stood beside her, looking relieved the moment Frank presented the settlement terms. Mr. Whitmore, Judge Rodriguez said, reading over the agreement. You're dropping all reimbursement claims? Yes, Your Honor. That's a considerable sum to surrender. I know. But the trust funds for the children's education are non-negotiable, and Mrs. Whitmore admits full fault in the dissolution. Judge Rodriguez looked at Diane. Mrs. Whitmore, do you agree to these terms? Diane's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, Your Honor. Then let the record show both parties have reached an amicable settlement. Judge Rodriguez set down her pen and looked directly at me. Mr. Whitmore, I must commend you. What your wife did was reprehensible. The fraud she committed deserved every consequence this court imposed. But those 3 children should not continue suffering for their mother's mistakes. This resolution shows maturity and wisdom I don't often see in cases like these. She signed the decree. This matter is concluded. I walked out of that courtroom carrying something I hadn't felt in months. Not happiness, not peace, but maybe the first step toward both. I walked out of that courthouse feeling lighter than I'd felt in months. Not happy, not whole, but lighter. Over the next few weeks, I set up the trust funds. $150,000 each for Tyler, Emma, and Lucas. Accessible when they turned 21. Enough to cover college. Enough to give them a real start. I transferred money to Diane, too. Enough for her to move into a small house in a decent neighborhood. Not the mansion we'd lived in. Not even close, but safe, comfortable. Somewhere the kids could have their own rooms and she wouldn't work herself into an early grave. I didn't speak to them. Tyler, Emma, Lucas. I didn't know if I ever would, but I made sure they were taken care of. Seth met me for drinks one evening in late March. We sat in our usual booth, and he asked the question he always asked, "How you doing?" "Better," I admitted. "Not great, but better." "Any regrets?" I laughed, bitter. "About 1,000, but not about divorcing her, not about leaving. Those had to happen." "Then what do you regret?" "How hard I pushed it for." I swirled my drink, letting the anger control me. I spent 4 months trying to punish Diane by destroying everything around her, including the kids. Seth was quiet for a moment. "The anger was justified, Charles." "Sure, but justified anger can still do a hell of a lot of damage." I looked up at him. Tyler's text made me realize I was becoming the villain in their story, instead of the victim, and I couldn't let that happen. "So what happens now?" I smiled slightly. "Now I rebuild, on my own terms, with the truth as the foundation this time." By summer, I sold the big house. Too many memories, too many ghosts. I bought a smaller place by the lake, somewhere I'd always wanted to live but never had the chance. I started dating, cautiously. Julia, from my gym. She was divorced too, understood the complications of starting over. We took things slow. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during the marriage, took up woodworking, something I'd always wanted to try, traveled on quick weekend trips, just enough to remember the world was bigger than my pain. One afternoon in late August, my phone rang. Tyler's number. My hand shook when I answered. "Hey." His voice was awkward, uncertain. "I'm, starting college next week. Business administration, State University." "That's great, Tyler." "Thanks, and thanks for the trust fund." "You didn't have to do that." I closed my eyes. "I know. I was wondering if maybe you'd want to get coffee sometime. Or lunch. Me and Emma and Lucas. Not to, rebuild a family or anything. Just to not be strangers." The silence stretched between us. "I don't know if I can do that yet," I said finally. "I'm still figuring out how to live with all this." "Yeah, I get it." He paused. "But if you ever change your mind, we're around. I'll keep that in mind." 1 year after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Emily at the grocery store. She looked uncomfortable when she saw me, but she stopped. I surprised myself by asking, "How's Diane doing?" Emily chose her words carefully. "She's surviving, working 2 jobs. The kids help when they can. She's got a small house now. Stable." "She ask about me?" "Sometimes. She wonders how you're doing." "Tell her I'm fine." I shifted my grocery basket. "And tell her she got off easier than she deserved. I could have pushed for criminal charges. She'd be in prison right now. Instead, she's got a home and her kids. That's more mercy than she ever showed me." Emily nodded slowly. "She knows. She tells the kids all the time that you could have destroyed her completely. But you didn't. She's grateful, even though she's got no right to be." She doesn't, I agreed. But I didn't do it for her. I did it for them. They didn't deserve to lose everything because of her mistakes. They miss you, Emily said softly. I'm sure they do. But I can't be what they need anymore. I told Julia the whole story eventually. She listened without judgment, held my hand when I got angry, understood when I needed space. I checked their social media sometimes, anonymously. Tyler graduated with honors. Emma got into a good art school. Lucas was thriving in high school. They turned out okay. Diane still worked 2 jobs, barely scraping by. She'd lost her friends, her reputation, her comfortable life. She'd spend the next decade rebuilding something that would never match what she had before. That was her justice, not the nuclear devastation I'd planned, but justice, nonetheless. I was rebuilding too. Slower, more carefully, with truth as the foundation instead of lies. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was my life. And for the first time in 18 years, I knew exactly where I stood. 2 years after the divorce, a letter arrived with no return address. Tyler's handwriting. I know you said you couldn't see us yet. I respect that. But I need to tell you something. We took DNA tests to find our biological fathers, 3 different men. One's in prison. One wanted nothing to do with us. One agreed to meet, then left after 10 uncomfortable minutes. They're strangers, sperm donors who never wanted kids. You chose us. You chose to raise us, to love us for 18 years. You went to baseball games and recitals and helped with homework. Not because biology forced you to, but because you wanted to be our dad. Mom's lies took that choice away. But for 18 years, you had the choice, and you chose us. That makes you more of a father than any biological parent will ever be. I'm not asking you to come back or be part of our lives. I just needed you to know. When we think of Dad, we think of you. Not them. Always you. I read that letter a dozen times, tears streaming down my face. For the first time since I'd seen those DNA results, I felt something other than anger and betrayal. I felt peace. Not forgiveness for Diane. That would never come. But acceptance. That real love transcended biology. That the 18 years I gave them weren't wasted or built on lies. They were real. Complicated. Painful. Betrayed. But real. I put Tyler's letter in a drawer next to the photos I'd kept, and I moved forward carrying that truth. Sometimes justice means letting go. And sometimes revenge means building something better than what was destroyed. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.